Mike, are you jumping in and play that? Or I mean, Matt.
Yeah, I am.
Matt.
I am, but he needs to invite me to the stage.
Hold on.
I'm in.
Mike, test the audio real quick. Hold on. Do it again. No, do it again. I need to make sure I can hear you. All right. One more time. All right. No, you're good. You're good. It should be good. All right. Yo, good afternoon. Welcome to the Stochastic.com MLB Live Before Lock show. 4-game action today. Heading into a 110 slate. The whole thing with DraftKings is weird, Matt. It's like the game starts at 1, but it's a makeup game. So they don't include it, and then it just shows it at like 10 o'clock or something on draft. FanDuel doesn't have that issue. Like if you go to FanDuel, it just shows the only games that are actually on this slate.
I don't understand why that game is on the slate or is not on the slate, considering it's still happening. The 10 o'clock thing is weird, but they've been doing that with weather games just so it doesn't lock before any other game.
Correct.
So you can make lineup changes. It's just bizarre. I will say the one thing I hate most, though, has nothing to do with DraftKings. It's what we've seen on a couple of these Saturday slates recently where like lock is at 1, the last game is at 4, and there's like weather in that last game and it doesn't start until like after the night games start. I hate slates like that.
Fortunately, we don't have that today.
Yeah, 4 games that all start within an hour of each other. No weather issues, really.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. So let's dive into it, man. Happy to have you guys with us as always. If you don't mind, take a single second, hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. And remember, anything that ever has a shelf life, any of our strategy shows, you ever want to listen in podcast form, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, we got you all covered. There are links down there in the description if you're looking for easy ways to find it. But I would assume you know how to navigate those waters. Anyway, how was your day yesterday? How'd your night go?
It went okay. I did basically, I think, exactly what we talked about. I played Seattle and Colorado, and I ended up playing Crochet with Kikuchi. Nothing special, but decent. I think I cast 2 of my 3 lineups, so it was like you need those nights to continue to be able to play type of night, you know?
Yeah, I mean, Schmidt got off to an excellent start. He had like 4 Ks in the first couple of innings and then kind of unraveled. What's that? Are you muted or is that me?
That was me. My bad. My fault.
Yeah.
He was still fine is all I was saying.
He was fine. Yeah. I mean, look, Crochet ended up having a great start, but again, like we talked about, Toronto just doesn't strike out at a high clip, you know, despite him being good. 4 strikeouts, and then Kikuchi on the other side, fine. 6 innings, 2 earned, 6 strikeouts. So that's what you get. Ranger Suarez wasn't on that slate. He had another 7-inning, 1-run, 10 strikeout gem against the reigning world champ Texas Rangers, Matt. That guy just keeps doing it.
He does. Now, I will say, since we've talked about this, Nola also has thrown a complete game shutout. So not so bad himself. But yeah, I mean, Suarez, he's got it. Like, I know that the pedigree and past performance is why he's not higher in the Cy Young odds, but the longer the season goes, I mean, it is what it is.
Einsteinium, how about that beautiful DFS performance? He's super chatting us. I know exactly where you're going with that. You said, make the pivot, right? Make the pivot to Brian Wu. Yeah, he was solid, man. He was solid. Good call, Einsteinium. Thanks for the super chat as well. What did he finish with?
He was the best pitcher on the slate by far. He
Yeah.
finished with 30. And I'll tell you this. Go ahead.
So just a 6 scoreless, 2 hit, 7 strikeouts in the win. Yeah, real nice.
So in both my lineups that did decent, I had Dylan Moore in one who homered twice and Tovar in the other who homered twice. But if you didn't have Bobby Witt, you weren't taking anything down last night.
Yeah.
He's insane.
Pretty much. Let's see what we can do today. Got the top stacks tool loaded, got the top pitchers tool. Ran a Sims here. I'm actually going to run it for like smaller field single entry stuff for today. There's the 121 40K prize pool. There's a couple other nice single entries for this main slate. They don't do the mini max either for the early slate. Maybe they will start doing that once once basketball's fully over. I don't know. Either way, I'm going to run it for that. I assume Mike ran it for a larger field contest. So we'll have, something to compare and contrast here. But besides that, let's get to it, man. Looking at the top pitchers, and we'll go pitcher stacks. We'll hit on everything. If you guys have any questions, hit us up in the chat, hit us up in the playback chat, hit us up in Discord, wherever it is that you are, we've got you covered. But the ownership usually gets a little weird on these small slates. It's really not, though, today, because you actually have a handful of solid options. Like you have Tariq Skubal against Kansas City. You have Cole Reagans against Detroit. So in that same matchup, both teams with sub-4 on the implied totals. Hunter Brown is getting ownership against the LA Angels. That's always fun because we know what Hunter Brown has been for the majority of this season. He has looked a little bit better recently. Each of his last 2 games against Detroit and Milwaukee, he's been, I guess you could say, serviceable, clearly bailed out by the win on that last start. But Simeon Woods Richardson, I don't think the guy's particularly good, but he's facing Washington, so he has a good enough matchup there. But really, the Skubal and Reagan spot, and then Hunter Brown at that price point, Matt, I actually want to start here. 34% projected ownership going to Hunter Brown right now on the early slate.
Yeah, it's just a price thing. And like the talent level is there. The median projection is there for his price tag. You just know what you're getting in bed with when you play a Hunter Brown. Like he's Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. More of the bad side, much more of the bad side this year.
Much more Jekyll. Jekyll was
much more Jekyll.
One, right?
Okay, yeah. Thank you for helping me out there. So he's not been good this year, but he's been a very good pitcher in years past. Very cheap. I still like the matchup, even though the Angels are, hot right now. Doesn't mean all that much to me. I do think, though, Skubal and Reagans look amazing here, considering, and rostering them both is more than doable. But not that you're pigeonholed because there's enough places to go. You can't get too many expensive bats when you do that. So that's where Hunter Brown comes into the picture. I'm fine with it. Like, it's not an Aaron Brooks situation for me yesterday where I just think he stinks and he should never be getting ownership like that. I do think Hunter Brown is talented, but he's also overowned on this slate, and stacking the Angels against him is more than viable.
I always thought Jekyll was the bad. I just looked it up. So he creates a serum or a potion in an attempt to separate the hidden evil from his personality. In doing so, Jekyll transformed into the smaller, younger, cruel, remorseless, and evil Hyde. Jekyll has many friends and an amiable personality, but as Hyde, he becomes mysterious and violent.
When you're explaining it, I was like, yeah, that makes sense because the doctor does the transforming.
Yeah. I don't know shit about that. I just always thought Jekyll was the bad one. You learn something new every day. Anyway. Yeah. Brown at that. Well, the other thing about some of the, like, Jose Quintana is super cheap. You don't love the matchup against Cleveland. Like, as far as strikeouts go, there's not a lot of meat on the bone. There is one guy, though, that's not getting a lot of ownership. and we'll jump in because we can talk about Scooble and Reagan's. I actually think there's less to say about those guys, right? Like on a 4-game slate, I think there's less to say about them than there is about some of these others. What about Tristan McKenzie? Like this guy started, you're a Cleveland fan. You've got that sweet Gucci hat. Tristan McKenzie started off the year and it did not look good. Even his second start against the White Sox, where like he had a strong outing, his velocity was down. He was getting hit pretty hard. Things did not look good. His first like 3 starts, he has turned things around significantly. And, against Houston, he was very solid. He had the White Sox, he had Minnesota, so I'm not going to sugarcoat this. He had Detroit, against Boston, whatever, he was fine. Oakland. So he's had a slew of good matchups. Is there an argument for saying it's a 4-game slate? Scooble's like 50% owned. Reagan's is 36% right now in our ownership projections. Brown's at 34%. Simeon Woods Richardson at 22. Tristan McKenzie's pulling 17% ownership on a 4-game slate.
Yeah, that's surprising considering the options that are getting love. He's close enough in price point to the top guys, and his underlying numbers are so much worse than his actual numbers as far as ERA, WOBA, like pretty much everything. So I'm a McKenzie fan. I still don't think he's right. He's got that injury that he opted not to have surgery for, a la Nola, and he's gotten by, but the stuff isn't all the way there. For me, it's just an ownership play, over the 3 guys we talked about at first, but I don't like him enough to do that personally. That said, if I were playing like 150 today, I wouldn't be like crossing him out, but I'd probably be right where the field is.
All right. What about Jake Irvin? $7,400, 17%. Going up against Minnesota. Like if we know one thing about this spot is that Minnesota could punish him. Minnesota yesterday. Of course, I had bet Jeffers to homer. I know Greg had Carlos Correa. Minnesota had like 4 or 5 home runs. Just so happened to be neither of those guys, but Minnesota can absolutely punish you. They've got some good bats. They're definitely more concerning when it comes to facing left-handed pitching. What about a 70? Now, you don't love the price point here. It's not like this is a remarkable pitcher by any stretch, but what do you make of someone like Irvin getting the second lowest ownership? The only guy getting more ownership is less ownership is Tyler Anderson.
I feel basically the same about Irvin as I do McKenzie, which is sad, but for McKenzie's sake, but true. He's fine. I don't really feel great about playing him. It's just an ownership play. And when you get to these small slates, the leverage and ownership matters so much more in baseball small slates than, frankly, in any other sport in my eyes. So there's merit to playing those guys because they're not awful and they're clearly not that much different than everyone but Scooble and Reagan's. They just project a little bit worse. So I'm fine with Irvin. I'm fine with McKenzie. I don't have any like glowing recommendations for either of them though.
So here's the reason I ask, right? Hunter Brown is going to be, we can agree, he's going to be very popular, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, probably what, 30, 35%?
Yeah, I expect 30 to 35, sure.
And how much of that is going to be in Scooble or Reagan's lineups?
Like all of it.
Yeah.
80% of it.
He does have decent strikeout stuff, 23% K rate this season. He's walking guys at a 12% clip. And I think it's fair to say that he's been unlucky. His strand rate is below average. His BABIP is way above average. His FIP is still 550. xERA is 462. His ERA is 7.71. A lot of that's skewed by that one start against Kansas City where he couldn't get out of the first, and he got legitimately singled in BABIP to death. But he's no sure thing. So that's why I'm asking you about some of these lower owned guys that are pulling like less than half of his ownership right now. There's nothing exciting about any of them at all. But Minnesota is one of those teams that can come out and just fall flat. And then Jake Irvin ends up having a, 6-inning, 1-run, 6 strikeout in the win type game. And you go, oh, okay, I could have used that over Hunter Brown today. So I don't think the conversation is, are you excited about Quintana or McKenzie or Irvin, but more so, how are you playing this on a two pitcher site?
No, I'm totally with you, man. Like I probably phrased what I was trying to say incorrectly. For me, it's just that I can't really decipher between McKenzie, Irvin, and Woods Richardson, but they all look appealing because they're not Hunter Brown. And frankly, when you get to slates of this size, they're not Reagans or Skubal either, if that's how you like to play. Like, I like Skubal and Reagans a lot. I'm probably just going to play both those guys. But if you're not, certainly Hunter Brown is no guarantee. He's had like a very roller coaster type season. Yeah, his ERA is ballooned because of that one start, but it's not like his expected numbers are all that great either. So, yeah, Woods Richardson, Irvin, and McKenzie all look similarly viable to me. I'm just having a hard time deciphering between them, if that makes sense.
It does. What it comes down to for me is like Skubal and Reagans are pretty obvious answers. You know what I mean? But I don't know how obvious of an answer Hunter Brown is. I guess that's what I want to try and figure out here. Like for you, how obvious is Hunter Brown? Let's say, you're making 3 lineups. Every one of them is going to have at least one of Skubal or Reagans. I can't imagine it doesn't, right?
No, yeah, I'll probably play, full disclosure, I'll probably play in all 3 lineups. I'm playing Skubal and Reagans in all of them. Your question is, if I wasn't doing that, who would I want to play with one of those guys? Still probably Hunter Brown, because I think he's the best pitcher of the bunch. And I do think a lot of people are just going to play Skubal Reagan. So Brown will come in as like the clear 3rd highest owned. And I just don't have the confidence in Woods Richardson, Irvin, or McKenzie to want to, plant my flag there. I'd rather get different with my offenses, quite frankly.
I mean, the Angels.
I mean, that's why I'm just going to play Reagans and Skubal, is because I don't want to play a chalky Hunter Brown. I just don't like the other options there. I'd rather spend down, and maybe, certainly there's opportunity cost. I'm not going to be able to get some of the expensive bats, but there's plenty of ways to make it work in baseball.
Oh, absolutely. Look, don't get me wrong. There's other bats here that we can make work. It is just crazy because Hunter, I don't think anyone would argue against LA also being a semi-viable stack here as well. Like Hunter Brown's allowing around 2 home runs per 9. He has a 22% home run to fly ball rate. He has been tagged pretty good.
For sure. I think for me, like ownership on pitcher is pretty clear on what it's going to be, right? Like Skubal, Reagans, and Hunter Brown are going to be the 3 highest owned, with Skubal and Reagans being the highest owned in my eyes. Right now, we've got our projection on stacks, like basically even across the board outside of Detroit and Kansas City. How do we think that actually comes in?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the more I look at it, the more I lean just like, all right, how easy is it just to play Skubal and Reagans and move on?
It's easy, but not if you want to stack like the Astros, which it's the Astros, and the top of their lineup, the top 3 guys are all 5,500 or above. So they have some cheaper guys in there also, but that's where Hunter Brown comes into play. But for me, no offense is worth not playing Skubal and Reagans, I don't think.
Mike, do me a favor. Go to the Sims here. I want to see these Skubal Reagans lineups. I want to see what the stacks look like. Are we going to be looking at, I'm seeing some Skubal and Reagans for me with like 5-3 Cleveland Angels, 4-4 Cleveland Angels, which makes sense. I don't know how much leverage you could say you're getting stacking the Angels, because I still think people are going to do it. I think the field's sharper than it once was. Like if you and I had this conversation 5 years ago and Hunter Brown was getting 35%, the Angels would just be like a remarkably good stack. They would be fantastic. But today they're pulling similar ownership to the most of the higher owned stacks. Minnesota's at 15, Houston's at 16, Mets are at 14 against McKenzie. I don't love that. Washington at 12, and then Angels hovering around 12 as well. So they're all up there. and it doesn't shock me at all. So hold on a second. Let me see what we've got here, Matt. Go to, yeah, you got stack exposures up there. All right. So you got stack exposures. Sort by 5-man stack exposure.
Like, because let me just interject with something real quick. So you're so right. And that's how we have it projected right now. But do we really think that the Mets come in with the same ownership as Houston here? They might. Price tags and stuff matter. But I could also see teams like the Mets and the Nationals, whose pitchers they're facing aren't popular, just kind of fall through the cracks a bit because both sides aren't getting any love.
What are the expensive stacks on this slate?
Houston and Kansas City.
And exactly. And Kansas City's got Scooble.
Yeah, they're going to be low owned.
Makes you think that the Houston ownership is going to be even higher than we have it right now, though.
That's what I think. Anderson is not getting any ownership. He's probably the worst pitcher on the slate as far as people like to pick on for DFS purposes. He kind of reminds me of Martin Perez, though. Like, not great. He's probably better than Perez, but I don't know. I just don't love stacking against him. Certainly not this year. But Houston's Houston. So I think they're going to end up with a lot of ownership. Same with like the top of Minnesota's lineup, the top of Cleveland's lineup. I think all these ownership are skewed by like the best players in the lineups. I think that if you're using like the back half of the Angels or the Nationals lineup, like those guys aren't going to be owned.
Yeah, you're right. Ultimately, the more I look at this, though, like if you're playing Scooble and Brown, you're not stacking the Angels, right? And if you're going down to Brown, you're saving what? How much are you saving off of a Reagan's? So you'd be saving over $3,000 from Reagan. If you go Reagan's Brown, you're saving $4,000 compared to the Scooble Reagan's pairing. I mean, you must think, Mike, go back to that for a second. Just leave that up there for me and go to lineups. That's what I want to see, not stacks. Go to lineups for a second. It's hard for me to see it on the screen. I'm trying to see.
I can zoom it in. Give me a second.
I'm trying to see like what the Reagan's Scooble lineups look like, Matt, because that's going to be important because the Sims are already factoring in ownership, salary, leverage, all of that stuff. You know what I mean? That'll give us a better idea of you and me just talking about it.
Yeah, 100%.
And maybe there just aren't a lot of those specific pairings. Reagan's Quintana, Woods Richardson, Brown, Reagan's Woods Richardson, Reagan's a lot of that. Keep going down. Do we have any Reagan's Scooble lineups? Tell me if you see any, Matt. So like that's not profiling right now in the Sims, at least, as a pairing that looks great.
That's interesting.
Right? Hold on. Let's go a little slow. No. That's interesting. Decent amount of Quintana in there too. What's that tell you, Matt?
That's wild. That tells me maybe really need to back. It's showing a lot more Reagans than Scooble, I feel like, too.
You're right. At that price discount, for sure.
It seems like it's jamming Houston in a lot of lineups. And there are expensive bats on this slate, like not just Houston. Jose Ramirez, the Mets top hitters, certainly Houston. So I get it. Like, you're really pigeonholed if you play Scooble and Reagan's together. No doubt about it.
Man, I thought you'd at least see some, but that is not the case. Also, Mike, hold on. Let me see if this will work.
Big time hitters up in Kansas City for whatever it's worth.
All right, do me a favor. Sorry, guys, but bear with me here. Go to lineups.
Yep.
And then you're going to go on the right side. You'll see lineups. Yeah, you'll see that. You'll see the little dots. Left. Slowly. No, left. No, lineups, under the lineups. Yeah, see that? Click on that on the right side, the three dots. All right, go to filter, and then do Reagan's, and then what you're going to do after that is do another one, make the column lineups, and put Scooble in there, and then sort by simulated ROI. Then we'll see how many there are that are favored out of the 150. While you do that, are there any other pitchers? Make sure that those are sorted, Mike, by the right ROI. Are there any other pitchers you want to talk about? Like, do you want to get to any Anderson? Do you want to get to Quintana because he's dirt cheap?
Quintana, no. Anderson is only interesting because of like game theory perspective on it. Like Houston's going to be the highest on offense in my mind, and he's not a gas can at all. So that's why he's interesting, and he's also the lowest owned pitcher on the slate. The problem is that it's almost like the Kansas City and Scooble thing. Like, well, I guess the opposite of that. If you're not using Scooble, you can easily spend up for Kansas City. So that works out nice. But yeah, as far as Anderson goes, like if you don't use him, it's harder to pay up for Houston. I don't even know what I'm saying here, but yeah, Anderson's fine as a contrarian option. That's it.
Mike, what stacks are we getting? First of all, what stacks are we getting with the Scooble and Reagan's lineups?
Cleveland, LA, and Washington, a 3-2-2, and then a LA Cleveland 5-3, LA Cleveland 5-2. A lot of Cleveland.
Okay, and a decent amount of LA, or mostly Cleveland?
Yes, I'll zoom it back out for everybody.
Okay. So there you go, Matt. Like if you're going Reagan's and Scooble, right now it feels like your best options based on what the Sims are giving us would be Cleveland, LA, some Washington, I suppose, too.
Yeah, I kind of like Washington. I don't think Simeon Woods Richardson is very good.
A
lot of spots like this, though.
No, yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, Simeon Woods Richardson is the type. I feel like every time I think he's going to be terrible, he just ends up not being terrible for the most part, right? Like he's had one bad start. Granted, he's faced Detroit and then White Sox, Seattle, Toronto. He got blown up, and then he faced Cleveland last time out. I thought Cleveland would take him for a ride. But that hasn't been the case. He's been like, okay. The strikeout stuff is not there though. Outside of one or two games, he's going to put the ball in play. What do you make of this Washington stack today? We're talking about a 4-game slate. Washington ownership at the current time on our last run, they're getting 12% ownership, but no real positive or negative leverage there. They grade out fine as far as stack score goes in the stack tool. Is Washington a spot that you're willing to get to?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like they're a team that could fall through the cracks a little bit, just like the Mets, maybe, with the Astros picking up more ownership is what I expect to happen. And they're cheap outside of CJ Abrams. And I don't think Woods Richardson is very good. So yeah, I'm definitely interested in the Washington side of this game. You can play them with Scooble and Reagan's. And yeah, I mean, I think they look ownership considered and what I expect them to come in at. I don't think you're crazy to say they're the top stack on the board today.
Mike, sorry, I'm working you overtime here. I want to show everybody that's watching that's on YouTube right now. I want to show them something in the top stack tool. So pull up the top stack tool. Matt, I want you to take a look at this as well, because you don't see this very often. Look at the stack score. Okay. Mike, just make sure you go to early. Okay.
Yep.
Look at the stack score for the top 6 teams.
It's like all the same. Never see that.
No. Like, yeah, of course. Kansas City against Scooble's low. Detroit against Reagan's pretty low. Washington's at 11. Angels against Brown are at 12. Houston against Anderson's 14. Mets against McKenzie, 15. Cleveland against Quintana, almost 16. And then Minnesota against Irvin is 17. I feel like if there was ever a slate to get away from chalk, this would be it. The problem is, I still feel like Houston's going to be the chalkiest of the bunch. Maybe I'm just way off.
No, that's why Brown's going to get ownership. And they have 3 expensive guys, but the rest of their lineup's cheap. I mean, our ownership projections show that. Like Tucker and Altuve are projected to be the 2 highest owned hitters on the slate. Alvarez, like top 7 or 8. Bregman and Pena not that far behind them. So I agree with you. And the smaller the field, like the higher the dollar, the higher Houston will be owned. So looking at the tools, it makes me just be like, why not just stack Minnesota here? Because all the ownerships are the same. And they're the top stack on the board, not by a ton, but they are. So if they're going to be less owned than Houston, kind of want to lean towards Minnesota.
I hear you. Still blown away that the Reagan's Scuba lineups weren't more popular. It's expensive, I guess. And you're right. You know, it's also expensive to get to those guys with how pricey some of these other bats are, for sure. I will say this much though. When I ran a Sims for a smaller field, a lot more Scooble Reagan's lineups. So it's definitely specific to the field as well.
For sure. No doubt about that.
And that was 5,000 I ran.
Right. That was 5,000. I ran one on 500 just to see what some of these smaller field single entry lineups would look like. And it definitely, like in my top 10, I see 3 that have Reagan's and Scooble. So yeah, it is definitely a little bit different. Really, I'm, if I were to say like, all right, who are your top stacks right now? I think we agree that on paper, Houston is still up there. Minnesota is clearly still up there. Beyond that, though, Cleveland against Quintana. Yeah, I do lean, and I know they don't look perfect, but there's really not a huge difference between the Angels and some of these other teams. I still lean towards the Angels as being a spot that maybe come in lesser owned because of Hunter Brown. Like if I were to pivot to try and get leverage off of a pitcher to get to a stack, I would rather do it with the Angels against a very popular Brown than Detroit or Kansas City against the popular Reagans or Scuba, unless you see it differently.
I don't. I feel like a lot of this is kind of what we talked about yesterday with Oakland and Colorado. I ended up liking Colorado more anyways, but like, I don't want to get caught up in like Minnesota, has slightly better leverage than Cleveland. And that's why I'm going to plant my flag on Minnesota, because projections are just that. Like the ownership is not going to come out exactly what this shows. So there's nuance to all this. And it's kind of on slates like this, trying to, figure out a little bit what the ownership's going to come in, because ownership matters on slates like this even more than normal. So like we expect Houston to be higher owned. Where does that ownership come from? I think the Angels is a reasonable guess. And also the ownership on Brown is so high that the Angels are in play no matter what. So that ownership wouldn't bother me either. I'm with you.
Where do you look towards as your favorite stacks?
It's tough. I mean, they all look so similar except for Detroit and Kansas City. They really do. I don't think Washington and the Angels are far behind the others at all. I guess I'm going to say right now, I'll go with Cleveland because I think Quintana's the worst pitcher on the slate right now. And their ownership is like right in line with the other teams. And I don't think that they necessarily will be chalky at all either.
Is there an argument to be made for like maybe looking towards the back half of some of these stacks or?
Definitely. I'll be doing that. Like I'm going to probably plant my flag on 1 or 2 of these teams in the 3 lineups I make. Definitely use the back half of lineups. They're cheaper. They're not going to get much ownership. I want to play Scooble and Reagans. So yeah, whether it's Washington, the Mets, Cleveland, any of these teams, I will be playing the back half.
Because it's pretty crazy when you look at Houston. Now, to be fair, almost all of Houston is projected for double-digit ownership. Like I'm just on the ownership projections themselves, not stack or pitchers tool, just looking at ownership. And all of these guys are going to be relatively high owned. But at the same time, look at the price points on some of the back half of the roster or the back half of the lineup on Houston. Like you get pretty cheap pretty quick.
You do. And it's going to make, that's why they're all projected for ownership. So It's going to be even higher than that in like the smaller field stuff. That's like well, it's the same, but also kind of puts things into perspective. We show Kansas City right now as being over-owned with 8% ownership. That's all coming from Bobby Witt and Salvador Perez, who are both projected to be 12% owned. Like, people aren't going to be full stacking the Royals in small field contests. Those two hitters will be used as one-offs by the teams that don't play Scooble, like that's just what it is.
Right. I guess what I'm thinking, like, I assume this is not optimal at all. Like, the cheap half of the Houston stack with Scooble and Reagans.
I mean, I feel like if you're stacking Houston, hard to not get like that's the thing. If you use the back half, you can get one or two of Altuve, Alvarez, or Tucker. You can't play all three of those guys, but I wouldn't run personally, I wouldn't run like a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 stack. I would run like a 7, 8, 9, 1, 2 stack,
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, Singleton's $3,600 batting sixth. There are a few of these guys. Go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say it to your point. Like, weird stuff happens in baseball all the time. Yesterday, Dylan Moore hit 9th for Seattle yesterday at shortstop only. JP Crawford was back leading off, also shortstop only. Crawford was 300 cheaper than Moore leading off. Moore is batting 9th. Not like Crawford was popular, but Moore was like 0.2% owned and had 35 DraftKings points. You don't expect that, but in MLB, back halves of lineups do go off. It's not like using bench players in the NBA.
Absolutely. What else you want to get to here while we wrap this one up? 4-game slate. We don't need to stay all the way up to 1 unless you guys have questions.
No, I mean, I'll go back to your, is stacking Detroit or Kansas City worth it on a slate like this? I don't think so. I think these pitchers are good enough where it's not really in the cards for me, but we've seen crazier shit play out this year. Ain't no doubt about that.
Let me just dig into something real quick here, because I know Reagan specifically, even when he has those rough outings, the dude has been absurdly good at preventing power. That's one of the things I always look at. Like, there's a lot of good pitchers that also give up power when they struggle, but he's allowed 3 home runs on the year and 56 innings pitched. Like, those are just elite numbers when it comes to limiting the long ball. Same with Scooble, 55 innings, 3 home runs. Also, for what it's worth, this Kansas City field, this field in Kansas City, Matt, it's not good at all for homers. Like, yes, extra base hits can be, semi-abundant there, but home runs are not. Like, this is going to be one of the bottom 5, bottom 6 parks for home runs every year.
Yeah, it's a great call out because it is good for hitting, but when you've got pitchers like this, you're going to need home runs, because they're just usually not going to get hit around. So it's a great point. Now, I will say the weather's probably hot as hell there, so that helps, but all things considered, I just think that's an extra not in the belts of Scooble and Reagan's.
Let's see. 69 degrees. So it's not like 71.
It's a little cooler here today too, so not shocking.
Yeah, not here. It's going to be for that Phillies game. I cooked up, throw it on Twitter, but I cooked up a little home run parlay, same game home run parlay with the $25 free bet you get from the Dinger Tuesday. And it is Philly and Texas. Dane Dunning been crushed on the long ball coming off the IL, 22% home run to fly ball rate. Not good. 16% barrel rate. Taijuan Walker, I don't believe in that guy at all. 55% fly ball rate, 18% barrel rate, 304 expected ISO against lefty bats. So, yeah, I'm going to dabble. I already did, Matt. It's like $25 to win 6,000 or something. We'll see if it is. Again, I think
Walker
total.
Sucks too. I think Walker sucks.
He's not good. His velocity's down. You look at last game, had he not gotten hit in the foot by that comebacker, things were unraveling. He's been hit really hard, and it's going to be 87 degrees at first pitch in Philly. So we will have some fun with that for sure. For sure. Yeah. The parlay. So I have Garcia in there. I don't know if he's going to play, but it's Harper, and then hold on, let me pull it up because I know Seager's in there, Harper, Clemens, and Garcia, but I don't know if Garcia is going to play. If he doesn't, you can swap him out with somebody else. So it was Garcia, who's day to day. I think he'd get back in the lineup. Seager, Harper, Cody Clemens. It was 25 on the free bet to win 6,800. Let's go.
I love that.
Yeah, I might do one more too and just mix it up. You know, that game has a 10-run total. If it ends up being 1-0, fine, fuck it. I'll live. But I'll tell you what, you know what Citizens Bank Park is like when it's hot out. And these guys giving up way too much power and way too many barreled balls. Like, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I love that game for DFS tonight, which I'll talk about later, but
That
I'm
640 game
100%
is
with
on the they put the 640 games on the main slate.
yeah, dude, I don't get it. Like, I feel like when there's an afternoon slate, they're more apt to do that. I just don't understand the method to their madness. I just will never. And
I know.
don't even, it's a fool's errand to try to figure it out.
I bet you if the early slate had like 3:30 or 3 o'clock games, they wouldn't, because they'd
Agreed.
allow it to pay out and then you know what I mean?
Yep.
But in this case, the games will be over, everything will pay out, you'll be fine. Tristan Ward, best single entry stack for FanDuel. Nice, Kevin said Dane might pitch a few innings and Rangers pen is so that's the thing, right? Exactly. Even if Dane Dunning doesn't go long in this, and by the way, he was only on the IL for a couple of weeks, so this wasn't like an extended stint. He had rotator cuff soreness or strain, so we'll see. But we'll have some fun with it. Anyway, Matt, if you're looking at FanDuel, their early slate contests have been very small, but if you're looking at FanDuel, what would you say your favorite stack is single entry on FanDuel? You're the perfect guy to ask for this because you love the single entry stuff.
On FanDuel, and again, you mentioned it, but their stuff has been so weak for like any non-main slate. Makes it hard to, really want to play heavy. It looks so similar to DK also, except, oh no, nothing looks really different. Ownership is similar across the board, more projected for Minnesota than on DK. They're a little bit cheaper. It doesn't really strike me as all that different though. How about yourself?
The one thing would be that I think it's probably going to be, I'm looking at pitching for a second here. See the pricing on pitchers. Because my guess is that Reagan's and I would assume the ownership is going to be outrageously high, right? Let's see. Scooble 37, Reagan's 27. I thought none of the other cheap guys would be getting any ownership whatsoever, but I think I'd go Houston in this spot. They grade out from a value perspective, significantly better on FanDuel than they do on DraftKings. They are getting ownership. That's hardly a surprise at all. And then just like looking at value across all of these, look at the difference between DraftKings and FanDuel. Whereas on DraftKings, you have a few teams that really pop from a value perspective. You don't have so much of that on DraftKings. It's all pretty similar. Like, whereas there's a few teams that are just down in the basement value-wise on DraftKings. FanDuel, I think there's a decent amount of, I think it'll be easier to get to some of these stacks than it would be on DraftKings.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially because you can only roster 4 players also. So,
yeah,
it just makes it a little bit easier to get the expensive stacks because there obviously aren't that many expensive players. Yeah, I'm not playing FanDuel on the early slate, so I didn't really dive into it too much. But if I was, I would approach it very similar to DK. I think the biggest difference is like choosing Scooble over Reagan's, or Reagan's over Scooble. And to be honest, I don't really think you can go wrong with either.
I wanted to say, like, the Angels, the only difference there is that when you're talking about the Angels from DraftKings to FanDuel, the Angels on DraftKings, even though it's like this slate, you're still getting good leverage off of Hunter Brown. Whereas with FanDuel, how much ownership do you really think's going to Hunter Brown? Like he's getting 10% projected ownership right now in our tools.
Not a lot. I mean, it's just a different play. There's so much more opportunity cost in not rostering either Scooble or Reagan's. I just don't think many people are going to want to go there. Which in a lot of ways makes him a better play on FanDuel, but that is what it is.
Let's do top pitchers and stacks before we get out of here. And as always, guys, you want to check out the Sims tool, the lineup generator, all of that stuff. Best tools you're going to find out there. And I think the unsolicited endorsements and testimonials that you guys see up here on the screen in the Hall of Fame segment all the time, 5-6 figure wins, even the smaller ones. Like we had one the other day, dude took down the nickel like 2 days in a row, first place out of 100,000 or something absurd like that. So the dollars, you look at dollars one, it's not going to blow your mind. But when you consider like the field that people are beating out in those large field, lower dollar contests, it's nuts. Absolutely nuts. We'd love to have you guys come out, check it out. Even if you try it for a week, come say what's up in the Discord, hang out. It's an awesome community. You've got ownership projections, the top stack tool, top pitchers tool, player projections, premium Discord, of course, the holy grail, the Sims, the contest generator, the late swap feature, which makes life insanely easy if you're someone that, can be relatively busy at times. And then the post-contest simulator where you can see how all of your lineups stack up against some of the best players, what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong. Anyway, you want to check any of that out, link in the description and in chat. You have questions, hit me up. Happy to answer them. And Greg's done some amazing tutorials that'll get you, set and running out of the gate with basically no learning curve whatsoever. But just so you know, you can customize these things. Like we've made the Sims now to where you can you can set exposure caps. You can do ROI boost. You can favorite the teams you want. All of that different stuff is going to make the experience so much better for you. And I think you'll love it. So check it out. And if you do, come say what's up in the Discord. We'd love to have you guys. And you're going to make better lineups, which is what matters more than anything else or anything I'm saying. But anyway, Matt, top stacks. We kind of did that already, but if you want to run them one more time.
Yeah, for sure. So my top stacks, and I've been going back and forth with this, but given where I think ownership is going to land, give me Washington, Cleveland, and then Minnesota.
Washington. Okay, so not Houston.
No, just because I think they're going to be the highest owned. Like I think they look the best on paper, but I think those other three teams I mentioned, specifically Washington, are going to be lower owned than we're projecting.
I think you're right. And I'm going to throw for DraftKings specifically, Angels into the mix. Let me see if let me just see what ownership are we. I'm going to update ownership one more time just to see if anything's changed. Because right now we're up against it, right? We got like 15 minutes to go, 10 minutes. Hunter Brown's still at 34%, Matt. So throw the Angels into the mix there. For pitchers, obviously Scooble and Reagan's. Look, it gets ugly after that, but if I assume you're going to throw Brown into the mix at 3. I don't blame anybody for doing that. I'm going to say Irvin against Minnesota because the strikeouts can be there. They're better against lefties than they are against righties. And he's getting less than half the ownership of Hunter Brown.
Yeah, that's fair.
Also, I think Minnesota is the most popular stack on the slate.
Yeah, I think Minnesota and Houston could easily be. It's obviously Scooble and Reagan's, can't get weird there. I'm going to go Hunter Brown just because as much as I don't like the ownership, I don't like the other pitchers even more. So they all have merit because they're not Hunter Brown. There's just no one I can choose that I like.
Hey, you can follow Matt at Fantasy Tips Matt on Twitter, me at Laffy_D. Appreciate you guys hanging out. We have one more question. If you're using, I can't read that. Why is my YouTube messing up? Clayton, what's that question from Clayton, Mike? Can you read that out loud? I wouldn't really care. I wouldn't be making those. I wouldn't be doing that by hand anyway. Do you have a preference there?
If I'm stacking the Angels, I probably want exposure to both. If I'm making one lineup and stacking the Angels, probably Sean Wally's leading off.
Yeah.
But
Both of
really,
them,
no, I don't
you
care.
got Calhoun in the cleanup too, right?
Yeah,
So,
I do
like,
not care. I do not
right.
care.
To me, it wouldn't matter. Like you said, if you're stacking them 8 times, I wouldn't want 8 of one and none of
Right.
the other. But
Not even a little bit. I'd want, however many. I'd want 4 and 4 if you're playing 8 angel stacks, ideally.
that shit pisses me off so bad when you've got like the best stack and you've nailed it, except you can't play both of them. And like the other day was Contreras and Sanchez, so it didn't
Mhm.
matter, right? Remember that they both had big games and
Monsters.
it didn't
Yeah.
matter. Give the people some dong picks. All right, hold on, I'll send them to you real quick. No, Matt, do you have a homer?
LOL. I wasn't in the. Now it like took me a second to calibrate that.
It
Yeah,
would
I'm
take
gonna
you
go.
even longer to calibrate it if I sent it to you, brother.
Didn't. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Eddie Rosario in the 2-hole against his former squad.
All right. I don't have one for this early slate. I haven't looked at enough individual spots. Give me I already gave you homers for that Philly and Rangers game. So I'm loading up on the bats from that. Loading up. I mean, if I'm same game parlaying home run bets from the same game, you know where we're at. So anyway, appreciate you guys. Have a great rest of the day. Live before lock tonight, little showdown action. Minnesota Timberwolves, Dallas Mavericks. Catch you on playback after that, and MLB Live before lock for a 10-game main slate that gets started, I think, 6:40 Eastern. So make sure you're around and aware. Until next time, peace.